If you are new here, welcome. If you are not new here, welcome back to Tea Time with Annika. So I have an inability to use slides with recordings on my computer or any of my technology in my house, really. So I'm a big storyteller, so we're going to kind of do it this way. Just bear with me and try to ignore the blower that you can hear in the background. So the concept for my project is literary journalism. And literary journalism kind of takes pieces of memories and research and kind of strings them all together in excerpts to make a sort of full theme. And the theme I'm pursuing for this is the question that was in the final. It's what interrupts the connection? And by the connection, we mean the way people connect to each other through the use of empathy. So what do depression, strokes, and dementia all have in common? The answer is that it creates this total breakdown in the brain, and that is the scientific term for it. And is your mind and all the nerves have a relapse, and they stop firing to each other. And it ends up involving a reset of like all the processes. And in an extreme case for like a stroke, for example, you end up having to relearn a lot of the things that you previously knew. So consider the connections of people, connections in the brain, nerves that are connecting, and it's a total breakdown where people stop firing towards each other. They're firing into the abyss. Edward T. Hall writes, "The essence of cross-cultural communication has more to do with releasing responses than with sending messages. It is more important to release the right response than to send the right message." So in my presentation, I end up using different memories. This is a friend of mine. She's going to remain nameless. And she ended up telling me something that I had heard before and read, but never really heard from anybody. And it was that she wasn't white enough for her white side of the family, and she's not black enough for her black side of the family. And it was the first time I had a friend who was telling me these stories, these things that I'd heard, and it was a connection that we hadn't really had. Another concept I found interesting in researching, it's typically religious, but it's been used in psychology a lot now, it's soul ties. And soul ties is the idea in religion that having sex outside of marriage creates this like connection to the other person that you've had sex with. In psychology, it's more any sort of connection that you could be having in life. Like you are meant to be connected to them, and you have this invisible tie between them, even if you're no longer together. So this is my boyfriend. It was empathy. It's a questioning thing in the presentation. Is it empathy that drew me to him? He was an alcoholic whose mother had just died, and he is 7 years older than me. I was just 20. He was 27. And for some reason, I started kind of following him around, and we became best friends. And it's like interesting to think what drew me to him. And the first time he really talked to me about his issues, first time he was real, he was extremely drunk. And he was gripping my hand, and he was saying, you believe me about a situation. And it was the first, I realized he just wanted someone to see him for who he was. Building off of the concept of wanting people to see you, there is a Syrian refugee study that graduate level health personnel had more empathy than postgraduate health personnel. And I wondered, why is that? Is it exhaustion of the heart, like a numbness to seeing so much pain and suffering over so long of a period? Bringing it back to the connection between humans and your brain, brain overload is actually a risk factor for depression, which kind of connects back to the beginning, and connectivity is weakened and the parts don't work together like they should, which is something to think about for the way people are. Like, we don't work together as much as we should, and if we have an overload like of stimuli, in this case like with the Syrian refugee study, then that might be a connection that's interesting. Last big piece of research that I use in there is that mindfulness increases empathy, and that was found in an online study. Being present in the moment and mindful of others' differences really will increase empathy and help bridge the connection gap. According to Anthony Robbins, the way we communicate with others and with ourselves ultimately determines the quality of our lives. Connection is exhausting. Coming from an empath, it's very hard to constantly be bridging, but there's a way to connect to people without taking on everything. And I feel like that's a big issue that I'm noticing through all of this research. Empath, no one asks you to fix them. You can't take away all the pain and heal the scars of wars, literal and personal. The world is not so easily healed. It is each and every moment, one step at a time. Most people aren't asking to be fixed or saved. True empathy is listening and understanding, an understanding that surpasses personal experience and belief. The connection is disrupted by atmospheric signals as we lose ourselves in the pain of what we experience and know. If we only chase what we relate to and understand, what doesn't hurt to watch or listen to, all we will learn is what we already know. Empathy is not getting it. It's not fixing it. There's a way to feel and connect without becoming emotionally burdened. Perhaps it's just a bit harder to practice. Most people don't want to be fixed. They just want to be seen.